The departure hall at Mataifa International Airport was loud with rolling suitcases and boarding announcements, but for Zuberi Kamanzi, everything suddenly felt quiet. He stood near his family, holding a small backpack, while they stood perfectly dressed, calm and proud, like strangers waiting for a photo, not a goodbye. His father's voice cut through the noise. Loud. Tum hamar liya mar chuk ho. You are dead to us. People nearby turned to look. Zuberi felt his chest tighten, but he didn't speak. His mother avoided his eyes, staring straight ahead as if he wasn't standing there at all. His sister crossed her arms and whispered, "You're embarrassing us. Just go." Zuberi tried to say something, anything, but his father raised his hand and called security instead. 2 guards walked over. One asked what the problem was. His father pointed at Zuberi like he was a thief. "He's not with us," he said. "Remove him." The crowd watched. Some people stared with curiosity, others with pity. Phones came out. Zuberi felt smaller with every second, like he was being erased right there in public, not just as a son but as a human being. Security asked him to step aside. Zuberi nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just picked up his bag and walked away. Each step felt heavy, but he kept moving. No one followed him. No one called his name. As he walked alone through the vast airport, one thought echoed in his mind. This was the moment his family abandoned him. And they didn't even look back. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, calm and polite, as if nothing in the world was wrong. Now boarding business class passengers for flight KQ 814. Zuberi stood still for a moment, watching his family step forward. They moved together, confident, polished, like they belonged everywhere they went. He stayed behind in the economy line, holding his boarding pass so tightly it bent in his hand. His mother walked past him without stopping. For half a second, Zuberi thought she might look at him. Instead, she turned her face away, adjusting her scarf, pretending to study the sign above the gate. That small movement hurt more than his father's loud words earlier. Silence, he realized, could be crueler than shouting. His sister slowed her steps just enough to lean back. Without turning around, she whispered, "Don't follow us." Her voice was low, urgent, and cold. Then she smiled at the flight attendant and walked on, as if she hadn't just crushed her brother's heart in one sentence. Zuberi swallowed hard. His throat burned, but he refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers. Around him, people were laughing, talking about vacations and meetings, unaware that a family was breaking apart right beside them. He looked down at his ticket, economy class, last boarding group. It felt like proof of how far he had fallen in their eyes. Another announcement filled the air. Final call for remaining passengers. The words echoed louder than they should have. Zuberi took a slow breath and stepped forward with the economy passengers. No one pushed him. No one rushed him. Still, he felt like he was walking through water, heavy and slow. Inside the plane, the narrow aisle stretched ahead of him. He passed the business class section first. Of seats, warm smiles. His family was already there. His father was laughing at something on his phone. His mother was fixing her seatbelt. None of them looked up. Not once. Zuberi kept walking. Row after row, the cabin grew quieter. The seats became tighter. The lights dimmer. When he finally reached the very back, he placed his bag under the seat and sat down. The engine hummed softly, like a distant warning. He stared at the seat in front of him, feeling the weight of everything he hadn't said. As the doors prepared to close, Zuberi rested his head back and closed his eyes. He told himself to breathe. This was just a flight, he thought. Just a seat. But deep inside he knew the truth. This wasn't about business class or economy. This was about being left behind, by the people who were supposed to stand with him. And as the plane prepared to move, Zuberi sat alone at the very back, carrying his pain in silence, waiting for something, anything to change. The cabin doors closed with a heavy sound, final and unforgiving. A soft chime followed, and the flight attendants moved down the aisle, checking seatbelts. Flight KQ 814 was sealed. There was no turning back now. Zuberi sat at the very back, his hands resting on his knees, his body still but his mind racing. From his seat, he could see the business class section ahead. Laughter floated through the cabin, light and careless. His family's voices stood out clearly. His father joked loudly. His sister laughed too hard. His mother joined in, as if nothing painful had happened in the departure hall. As if a sun had not been erased just minutes ago. Each laugh landed on Zuberi's chest like a quiet, slow but deep. He turned his face toward the window. Outside, the runway lights stretched into long glowing lines. The sky was slowly changing color, blue fading into gold. Zuberi pressed his forehead lightly against the cool glass, hoping the cold would calm him. He breathed in, then out, counting the seconds. 5 minutes, he told himself. Just survive 5 silent minutes. But silence has a strange way of opening old doors. He remembered being a child, staying up late at the kitchen table, fixing his father's old laptop while everyone slept. He remembered skipping school trips so his sister could have new shoes. He remembered working small jobs, hiding his tired hands, telling himself that family came first. Always family. He had believed that love was earned through sacrifice. His chest tightened. He remembered the day his father told him his dreams were useless. The day his mother said, "Do something respectable." The day his sister stopped defending him. Those memories rushed back, one after another, clear and sharp, as if they had been waiting for this moment. The plane began to move slowly. A gentle shake ran through the cabin. Zuberi stayed still, eyes open now, watching the ground slide past. He wondered how people could sit so close together and live in completely different worlds. Then his phone buzzed once in his pocket. The sound was small, but it felt loud in his ears. Zuberi froze. He didn't reach for it. He didn't even blink. Unknown number, he thought. Probably nothing. Probably another reminder that no one really needed him. He let the phone stay silent, face down, untouched. The laughter ahead continued. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins closed. Life moved on. Zuberi swallowed and straightened his back. Whatever this flight was about to bring, he would face it alone. For the first time in his life, he stopped waiting for his family to choose him. The plane rolled forward, carrying everyone toward the sky. And in those 5 silent minutes, something inside Zuberi finally broke, and something else quietly began to rise. The gentle hum of the engines filled the cabin as Flight KQ-814 rolled down the taxiway, passengers settling into their seats, some reading, some scrolling through phones, most unaware of the tension that lingered in the back. Zuberi sat quietly, staring out the window, his hands resting on his knees. Then, a sudden click broke through the monotony, startling a few passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated." The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. Carried a weight that made heads lift, hearts pause. The plane shuddered to a halt mid-taxi, the wheels squealing slightly against the asphalt. A few murmurs ran through the cabin. Flight attendants exchanged confused glances, walking briskly down the aisle to check what was happening. Zuberi froze. Something was different. He could feel it, an unusual energy in the air. Then the captain's voice came again, sharper this time, echoing through the cabin. "May I have Zuberi Kamonzi come forward, please?" The words hit Zuberi like a physical blow. He blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Around him, the cabin went silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones were lowered. Even the crying baby in the row ahead seemed to hush. All eyes turned toward him. The reactions in the business class section were immediate. His family's laughter vanished. His father's face drained of color. His mother's hands trembled slightly over her designer bag. His sister's lips parted, but no words came out. They all looked as though someone had pulled the ground from under their feet. Passengers in economy craned their necks, curious. Some whispered quietly to each other, sensing the drama unfolding. Flight attendants stood frozen near their seats, unsure of what to do. The pilot's calm authority seemed to hang in the air like a powerful magnet, drawing everyone's attention to the man sitting alone at the back. Zuberi swallowed hard. His heart pounded, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The long years of being ignored, the silent rejection, the memories of sacrifices that went unseen, they all seemed to converge in this one moment. He could feel the eyes on him, the weight of judgment and disbelief, but he didn't flinch. He didn't look away. For the first time, he realized the power of silence, of waiting. The plane was no longer moving, the cabin no longer buzzing, and yet something bigger than all the noise outside had taken over. Zubri's name had been called by someone who mattered, someone who saw him for what he truly was. And in that stillness, with the entire cabin holding its breath, Zubri felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. Everything was about to change. The air was thick with anticipation, and the people who once erased him were now frozen, waiting, powerless, and painfully aware that their son, their brother, was no longer invisible. The flight attendant appeared at Zubri's row, clipboard in hand, her expression polite but urgent. She paused in front of him, her eyes scanning his face as if confirming he was the person being called. "Sir, please come forward," she said softly, yet her voice carried through the quiet cabin. Zubri felt the weight of every gaze shift toward him. The passengers in economy turned their heads, some curious, some shocked. Even those in business class leaned slightly forward, straining to see what was happening. He could hear whispers, murmurs bouncing off the walls of the plane. Is he really being called? What's happening? He slowly stood up, his backpack sliding down one shoulder. Each movement was deliberate, controlled. He didn't rush. He didn't stumble. It felt like the entire plane had shrunk to the width of the aisle, and he was the only person moving through it. At the front, his family reacted immediately. His father's face paled, lips parting as if to speak, but only a whisper escaped. "Yekia drama high," he muttered, voice trembling slightly. His mother clutched her scarf, eyes wide, trying to mask the panic rising inside her. His sister's hands pressed together, nails digging into her palms, eyes darting nervously between him and the flight attendant. Passengers shifted in their seats, some craning to get a better view. Phones appeared in hands, ready to capture the moment. A few people leaned forward, whispering among themselves, sensing the tension, the story unfolding live in front of them. Zubri walked calmly, step by step, straight down the narrow aisle. His chest was steady, his head held high. Every memory of being erased, every word of rejection, every quiet tear he had swallowed, he carried them all with him, not as pain but as proof. Proof that he had survived. Proof that he was still here, still standing, still alive in a way they could no longer ignore. The sound of his shoes against the aisle was faint but steady, marking each step like a heartbeat echoing through the cabin. He passed rows of curious strangers, feeling their eyes like tiny flames warming his resolve. He ignored the tiny whispers, the stares, the silent gasps. This was no longer about fear or humiliation. This was about truth. When he reached the front of the economy section, just before the business class seats, the flight attendant stepped aside. Zubri paused for a brief moment, glancing toward his family. Their faces reflected panic, disbelief, and something else he had never seen before: vulnerability. Then he stepped forward again, calm, composed, almost regal. The cabin remained silent, every eye locked on him. The walk, though short in distance, carried the weight of years of neglect, pain, and rejection. For Zubri, this wasn't just walking down an aisle. This was walking into a moment where he finally existed, where the world had no choice but to see him. And as he moved closer to the front, he could feel a quiet power settling in his chest. The walk of truth had begun, and nothing, not their laughter, their wealth, or their judgment, could erase him now. The cockpit door slid open, and the captain stepped out, tall and calm, his uniform crisp under the cabin lights. He looked directly at Zubri and, without a word, snapped a sharp salute. The gesture was small, precise, and yet it carried more respect than anything Zubri had ever received from his family. The cabin went completely silent. The faint hum of the engines felt like a distant whisper now. Every passenger, every crew member, and especially Zubri's family turned their full attention toward him. His father's jaw tightened. His mother's eyes widened. His sister leaned forward in her seat, as if trying to understand what was happening. "Mr. Zubri Kamanzi," the captain began, voice steady, echoing through the aisle. "This flight exists because of you." Zubri froze. His heart thumped. His family's faces twisted into disbelief, confusion, panic. The captain continued, letting each word land like a hammer. "The emergency aviation software you designed, the system you created to prevent critical failures, has saved this airline millions. On every flight, your code is what keeps passengers safe. Today, this plane would not be airborne without your work. A murmur ran through the cabin. Some passengers gasped. Others whispered to each other, pointing discreetly. Zuberi's mother covered her mouth with her hand. His father shook his head silent. His sister's eyes filled with tears she didn't know how to hide. Zuberi felt a strange mix of emotions. Shock, disbelief, relief, and a deep, burning satisfaction. Years of being ignored, dismissed, and erased by his family suddenly felt irrelevant. The world, at least in this moment, recognized him. The captain looked around the cabin. Everyone, this man is the reason we are safe today. Every flight you board with confidence, every landing you reach without incident, it's because of his work. The words settled over the passengers like a warm wave. Some clapped softly, others simply stared, absorbing the gravity of the moment. Zuberi felt the weight of silence. It was different from the rejection at the airport. This silence was acknowledgement, respect, a recognition of his worth beyond money, beyond family titles. Zuberi turned his gaze to his family. Their faces, pale and trembling, reflected something they had never seen, the truth they had ignored. His father's arrogance had no shield here. His mother's beauty and social standing could not protect them from this moment. And his sister, the one who had whispered for him to leave, could only watch, powerless. The captain saluted him again, this time a little longer, more deliberate. Zuberi returned it, not as a boy seeking approval, but as a man who had survived, succeeded, and earned his place in the world on his own terms. The plane remained still, engines humming quietly, passengers staring, and Zuberi finally understood something deep and satisfying. He didn't need their recognition, their wealth, or their love. He only needed this truth to be seen, and today it was. For the first time in a long time, Zuberi smiled. Not out of pride, but because the world, and this plane, was finally acknowledging what he had always known about himself. He mattered. The cabin was silent, heavy with tension, when the captain's voice came over the intercom again. Calm, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this man, Zuberi Kamanzi, is the reason we are safe today." The words seemed to hang in the air, echoing softly off the walls of the plane. Passengers looked around in surprise, some whispering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. A few reached for their phones, already snapping quiet videos of the moment. Then slowly the applause began. First a few scattered claps from economy, then more, until the entire cabin was clapping, cheering, and murmuring words of admiration. Zuberi stayed seated, his chest rising and falling, his eyes calm. He didn't smile immediately. This wasn't about applause. It was about finally being seen, finally being recognized after years of being dismissed, ignored, and erased. The clapping swelled around him like a tide, and yet the most important people, the ones he had hoped would notice, were frozen in place. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks, hot and fast. Her shoulders shook, and for the first time, she looked truly human, vulnerable, stripped of pride and control. She had spent years teaching him how to be small, how to obey, how to serve her image. But now she was helpless in the face of the truth. His sister's face was pale, and her lips trembled. She gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain herself, but no words came. Every whisper she had ever spoken to cut him down, every small cruelty, now echoed back to her in this moment of helplessness. And his father, well, his father was silent. For once, the man who had always commanded attention, who had always believed his authority unshakable, couldn't even open his mouth. The sharp arrogance, the pride, the control, it had evaporated. He stared at Zuberi, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, unable to utter a single word. Passengers continued to clap, some standing now, others leaning forward in admiration. Some turned to watch the family, sensing the irony, sensing the reversal of power. The wealthy, image-obsessed family, who had thought they could erase their son with a few cruel words, were now powerless in the presence of his truth. Zuberi exhaled slowly, finally letting the tension in his shoulders ease. He looked at the applauding passengers, then back at his family. He saw the fear, the regret, the shock, the first real cracks in their armor. He didn't move toward them. He didn't yell, he didn't demand apologies. He simply let the truth settle around them, heavy and undeniable. In that moment, the applause wasn't just for him. It was a mirror, showing his family what they had lost, what they had failed to see for years. The power they thought they held over him no longer existed. Zubri's life, his achievements, his strength, they spoke louder than any word they could ever utter. And as the clapping continued, the family's realization became painfully clear. The boy they had erased in public had grown into a man they could no longer ignore. The captain's voice came once more, calm but commanding. "Mr. Zubri Kamanzi, please allow me to offer you a seat in first class. You deserve it." Zubri looked up, surprised for just a moment. The flight attendants gestured toward the luxurious row of soft leather seats, the ones his family had been occupying, the ones they had taken for granted. First class, a place of comfort, of privilege, of status. But Zubri didn't move immediately. He stayed seated for a few heartbeats, letting the passengers watch, letting the weight of the moment settle. He turned his eyes toward his family. Their faces were pale, tense, almost guilty. His father's lips were pressed tightly together. His mother's eyes glistened with tears she couldn't hide. His sister's hands trembled in her lap. They had always believed that money and status were everything, that wealth could demand respect. But now, in the quiet of the plane, Zubri could see their power dissolve. He spoke, his voice low but clear, carrying to the back of the cabin. "I didn't need your seat," he said, looking directly at them. "I needed your respect." The words hit like a quiet thunderclap. Passengers gasped softly, then a few whispered among themselves. Eyes widened, and some dabbed at tears, touched by the simple truth of it. The economy passengers, the ones who had watched silently, felt the power shift in the room. They could see it in the pale faces of the family who had once thought they controlled everything, and in the calm, steady gaze of the young man who had rebuilt his life alone. Zubri slowly stood, still refusing the first-class seat. He didn't need it. Comfort would not erase the years of pain, the memories of being dismissed, or the nights spent proving himself alone. This was about something far greater than luxury. It was about dignity, about truth, about finally being recognized for who he was, not what his family could buy or flaunt. The cabin remained quiet, except for the soft hum of the engines. Some passengers nodded quietly, some whispered words of admiration. Flight attendants exchanged looks, impressed, almost reverent. Even the family seemed frozen in time, powerless in the presence of honesty and self-worth. Zubri turned back toward the aisle, toward the back of the plane. He walked slowly, deliberately, a calm smile touching his lips. Each step carried the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every moment he had been told he was invisible. And with every step, he reclaimed a piece of himself they had tried to erase. In that moment, money lost its power. Status lost its meaning. And Zubri Kamanzi, sitting quietly in the back of the plane, became larger than the wealth and pride that had once tried to define him. The passengers felt it. His family felt it. And Zubri, for the first time in years, felt fully free. The cabin was quiet now, filled with a tense stillness that even the hum of the engines couldn't break. Zubri's family sat together in business class, faces pale, eyes wide, hands fidgeting nervously. His father cleared his throat, trying to gather words that didn't come. His mother's cheeks were wet with tears, her lips trembling. His sister's hands shook as she looked at him, guilt written clearly across her face. "Zubri, please," his mother began, her voice soft, broken. We were wrong. We shouldn't have." His father jumped in, voice cracking. "We never should have treated you that way. We didn't see you, son. Please forgive us." His sister leaned forward, voice low, almost whispering. "I'm so sorry, Zubri. I should have stood by you. I didn't understand." Zubri stayed seated. He didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He didn't speak at first. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, as if the entire plane was holding its breath. Passengers glanced nervously, sensing the intensity of what was unfolding. Some looked moved, some confused. But Zuberi wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about the years, the countless moments of rejection, the nights he had cried alone, the doors that had slammed in his face. Finally he spoke. His voice was steady, calm, and carried across the aisle to business class. "I hear your words," he said, "but this isn't about apologies. You didn't just hurt me yesterday or last week. You hurt me years ago. You kicked me out. You erased me from your lives. And I had to survive, alone." He paused, letting it sink in. He looked directly at each of them. "I rebuilt my life from nothing. I worked while you ignored me. I learned, I struggled, I fought. And here I am. Not because you finally decided I mattered, but because I made myself matter." His mother's tears fell faster. His sister pressed her face into her hands. His father's hands clenched the armrest, white-knuckled. They all had words, but now they seemed small, powerless against the truth he carried. Zuberi continued, "This is not drama. I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to show you what happens when a person is forced to stand alone. You want to say sorry. Say it. But know this, you lost years with me. You lost respect you will never earn back. And I don't need your forgiveness to know my worth." The passengers whispered softly, some dabbing at eyes, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The family had no answers. They had thought they controlled everything with money, influence, and appearances. But here, mid-flight, none of that mattered. Their power over him was gone. Zuberi leaned back, finally letting the tension in his shoulders ease. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply existed, whole, proud, and untouchable in a way they could no longer affect. The apology had come too late, and he had already moved beyond the pain. The plane continued its steady hum through the clouds, carrying Zuberi forward, away from the past, away from the family who tried to erase him, and toward a life built entirely on his own strength. And in that quiet mid-air moment, the painful truth settled on his family like a shadow they couldn't escape. They had lost him, and he was finally free. The plane touched down in Addis Ababa with a soft thud, tires rolling against the runway. The engines slowed, and a gentle cheer came from the passengers, not for the landing itself, but for the man who had made it possible. Zuberi sat back, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of every moment that had brought him here. As the seatbelt sign clicked off, passengers began standing, some approaching him one by one. "Thank you," a woman said, shaking his hand. "I had no idea. You saved us." Another passenger smiled, tears in her eyes. "You're a hero." Zuberi accepted their words quietly, nodding, letting their gratitude wash over him. For the first time in a long time, someone recognized his worth without judgment, without conditions. The captain appeared again, walking down the aisle. He stopped at Zuberi's row and offered a firm handshake, smiling warmly. "Once again, thank you," he said. "This airline owes you more than you know." Zuberi returned the handshake, feeling a surge of pride mixed with relief. Behind him, his family watched. They remained seated, frozen, powerless. His father's face was pale, eyes wide. His mother clutched her hands together, tears spilling silently. His sister looked down, shame and regret written across her face. They had tried to erase him, control him, diminish him, but now they were the ones left behind, emotionally stranded while the world acknowledged the man they had rejected. Zuberi stood and walked down the aisle slowly, every step deliberate, steady, free. The passengers stepped aside, clapping softly, some cheering, some wiping tears. He didn't glance back at his family. There was no need. They had seen everything, and they would never forget it. Reaching the exit, he paused for a moment, taking in the sunlit tarmac, the crowd of people who now saw him as he truly was. A small, quiet smile touched his lips. He whispered to himself, almost as if sharing a secret with the sky. "They kicked me out on the ground. The sky gave me my name back." And with that, Zuberi walked forward into the airport, into a life that was finally his own, carrying every scar, every victory, and every lesson. This was more than a landing. It was the beginning of everything he had earned, everything no one could ever take away again.